Hello everyone, my wife and I are here to give you practical tips on how to deal with living with contaminated drinking water. This is not about politics, this is not about debating science, these are just strategies to help you on a day-to-day basis. We are a family of 6, we have 4 children under the age of 10, and with that comes a lot of challenges, especially with dealing with this water. Our contaminant is PFOA. It is part of the family of chemicals called PFCs. The other commonly contaminated water supply chemical is PFOS. This contaminant, this toxin, finds its way into water supplies. It cannot be boiled away, it cannot be chlorinated away, and standard filters don't work on it. It's associated with a higher risk of several cancers and other health concerns, and there are more studies on the way. Whatever your contaminant is that you're dealing with, I highly encourage you to get to know your contaminant. This video is intended for some communities in Pennsylvania who've just started going through their ordeal, realizing that they have contaminated water. But in the past year, communities have popped up in Vermont, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Delaware, and Colorado who've all discovered that they have this same contaminant. So this is an issue that's probably going to keep growing, and we saw a need for it. Dealing with this issue can be very scary, very confusing, and very overwhelming, and our goal is simply to ease your transition into living a life off of bottled water. Now, when it comes to bottled water, you have a lot of choices. You can get 1-gallon containers, you can get 3-gallon containers, you can rent water jugs that can be heated, which is a huge advantage. We didn't really have that choice based on the layout of our kitchen and layout of our house, so we pretty much had to stay with 1-gallon jugs. We're going to give you some practical tips, especially in the kitchen and in the bathroom where most of your water is used. So before we start, a few things. We definitely cleaned the counter for this video. And yes, our microwave is missing a handle, but once again, we have 4 little kids, so it is what it is. This is my wife Heather, and she's going to talk to you about some of the secrets she discovered about handling this in the kitchen.
As we said, boiling and chlorine doesn't take care of our contaminants, so we had to really make sure that everything we were cooking always, if it involved water, it was from a bottle. Especially things like pasta and rice, which absorb water. We wanted to make sure that that's bottled water. My tea kettle, I realized after a few days I really didn't want to use it because it had probably been contaminated. I tried to wash it, it fell apart. Good riddance to me. I just use this pan. It's easy to clean. I always know it's clean. I can scrub it out with baking soda, and no worries about what's going on inside my kettle. Another strategy I really like to use is I got this pot, which is the kind of thing they use at convenience stores for coffee. It holds heat for 24 to 48 hours. So I would boil water on the stove about every 1 or 2 days. And you do have to follow the instructions and put hot water in first, which I didn't do, so I'm not going to do it. This was really handy, not just for things like instant oatmeal and tea, but also helped because we have a baby, and I did not want her being washed after every meal from the tap, so I would just keep washcloths nearby, give it a little pump, and I knew that she was always getting bottled water on her face. Other people use it if they had cuts on their hands or need to be washed. So this was my favorite, and the instructions say you clean it out periodically with baking soda. Washing, we got a lot of conflicting information about whether our contaminant was sticking to the dishes or whether it wasn't. So we went through and did a couple of different things. Sometimes we used paper. Also for a while we were double rinsing. That's what we used this for. So we would wash our dishes in the normal way from the tap, and then particularly baby utensils and baby things, we would do an extra rinse from the pot. A lot of people would still use their dishwashers. But we had heard that PFOA sticks in the water droplets, so if you get a lot of steam, all of a sudden that you're putting it into the air. So I always made sure when I opened my dishwasher that I had the window open and an exhaust fan, that people weren't sticking their face in it when we opened the dishwasher, so that the contamination would be going out instead of hanging around in our house. Also, we were warned not to use humidifiers with tap water, but to use bottled water for that as well. Storage was a big issue for us. First, we were tripping over bottles everywhere. They were cluttering up the table. We couldn't figure out what to do with them. And we eventually settled on stacking them under the table so that we could get to them when we needed them, but they weren't in the way all the time whenever we were trying to do anything. Another thing I did was I always kept one at the table so that anybody who needed a drink wouldn't be tempted to go and use the faucet. They could just grab it from the table where it was. And I usually keep two by the stove, so when I'm cooking I'm also seeing it and remembering to use the bottles and not running over to fill it from the tap.
Okay, now we're going to deal with showers and baths. Now, in terms of the information on our contaminant, skin absorption was not a big deal. Most people agree that it was practically nil in terms of contamination entering our body, except for people who have immune disorders or if you have broken skin or cuts. So in those cases, you want to limit your exposure. But this is why using the washing machine and having this in our clothes wasn't that big of a deal, because the contamination is so small coming in this way. But one of the big concerns that we had was steam. The contaminant would be in water droplets, so inhalation would be a problem. This is why we mentioned before no humidifiers with contaminated water. So basically you just want to open windows if you can and use exhaust fans if you can. The key to everything is limiting your shower time, especially with the children. And when dealing with this with our children, we wanted to pass on the information without passing on fear. So for the most part, we explained it matter-of-factly, and it worked. One of our children needed more details and needed to really hear everything laid out, but the other kids took to it pretty quickly, and they were fine with it. In terms of showering, we sort of had this drill sergeant shower thing going on where we guided them through and monitored them so that they could do it quickly. To really limit it, if you want to, you can approach it the same way you would approach if you had to conserve water if you were off of a well during a drought. And you basically turn the water on, get your whole body wet, turn the water off, do all the soap shampoo, turn the water back on, and that would give you the quickest exposure on this. Now, if we did baths, they were very quick baths. Some people I know actually transitioned some of their younger children away from baths to showers earlier than normally would to limit the exposure.
Yeah, our quick baths, the rule was by the time the bath was filled up, you had to be done.
Yeah, anything like that, or you can use a timer. Some people use timers, and that's anything to help establish a system that they get used to is right on. With our kids and with ourselves, two main things helped the most to ease our mind as much as we could and limit the exposure. The first was simply fewer baths and fewer showers, especially for our kids. And the second one was showering in other safe locations if we could. If you have family who live in places where there's no contaminated water, go there if you can. We had friends who were with uncontaminated water who offered us to use their shower if we needed to. And places like community recreation centers will often have showers there. Bring soap and do it, and it's not an issue. Emotionally, a lot of this stuff can feel overwhelming, but if you keep up with the systems, it actually works out because you're showering less and doing less in the bathroom. The extra time of keeping up with these systems sort of equals out in the end. Now, toothbrushing was a little bit tricky. What we did down here is we got a 3-gallon jug, and what we would just basically do is fill it up, which required, every few days we would do it. And what we trained our children to do is get used to getting the water out of this spout here. I don't think I put enough water. And the trick with our children was to make sure that when they put their toothbrush in the water stream, to do it low enough where it spills. But the key that we had was this piece of furniture with this hanging over the edge, and this sort of a dollar bowl that you could stuff in here that doesn't move, so it always catches the water. But again, keeping the toothbrushes low was one of the trickiest things for them to get used to. The other tricky thing is when you're spitting out, not to use the faucet. So maybe you want to put a piece of tape over the faucet so you remember not to use it, and you go back to here for rinsing. And once this is done, maybe every night or when it's near full, you can empty it out.
Or every time you use it.
Or every time you use it, because that would be the responsible thing to do. See, I did that there. But the basic gist is sort of getting used to these systems and getting your kids used to it, which takes some time, but really after a few weeks it just seemed like it was normal, which is kind of weird and surreal, but you'll get there. When it comes to bathing our babies and our youngest children, we were extra cautious because a drop of contamination in a smaller body will be more concentrated, more present as compared to a larger body, larger adult. we found that we would go many days without bathing the baby for precautions. In our house, we had no bathtub on the ground floor, so we did our bathing of our baby, if we needed to, in our sink with heated bottled water. You could also do sponge baths with that same water, or with baby wipes and different solutions that you can use that are out there. But the basic idea is that if people offer you another location to bathe your baby, you should definitely take them up on it, because it'll just really help ease your mind. So a few concluding thoughts. If you have a pet, I would highly recommend using bottled water for all of their water uses. If you're someone who does plants, I know a lot of people who've actually switched to potting their plant and using other soil and water, just out of concern, but that's your call. But there is data out there and information on that if you're interested. In particular, find out what works for you. If you saw a couple things in this video that you liked, I would just try one or two first and see how that goes. We're just a family who dealt with this. We're not experts, and just from one family to another, we want to help and offer what we can. We couldn't control everything, so we really did have to choose and prioritize what we were going to do and what we were going to focus on. But we just, want you to recognize that what little things you can do are going to be a help. If you have any questions or comments, please respectfully leave them in the comment section. And we wish you the best of luck and as little stress as possible.